It's kind of hard to walk down a city street lately. Or even like a quiet suburban path, maybe, without spotting them, right? Those e-bikes. Silent, just zipping past, going up hills like it's nothing. They've really exploded, haven't they? Gone from being this sort of niche thing to, well, pretty much everywhere. But what looks like just a simple change in transport, that's really just scratching the surface of a much bigger story. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving headfirst into this fascinating and honestly rapidly expanding global market for Li-ion e-bikes. And just so we're clear, Li-ion, we're talking about the ones powered by that advanced lithium-ion battery tech, the stuff that's really driving this whole, personal mobility revolution. Okay, so our deep dive today, it's grounded in some pretty solid data. It comes from a report by Cognitive Market Research. It's their global Li-ion e-bike market forecast looking all the way out to 2033. And our mission really is to unpack this significant market growth, figure out who the key players are, region by region, find those surprising trends, those accelerators, and ultimately try to get a handle on what these numbers actually mean for, well, for the future, how we move, maybe even how we plan our cities.
And when you say significant growth, you're not kidding. I mean, the global market for these Li-ion e-bikes, it was already huge. Pulled in almost, what, $28 billion back in 2021.
28 billion, wow.
Yeah. So it's not just a small trend. It feels more like a fundamental shift in, how people are choosing to get from A to B globally.
It's speeding up, right? Not slowing down.
Exactly. The report projects that number hitting over $35 billion by 2025.
Okay.
But the really striking figure is further out. By 2033, we're looking at a forecast of over $57.5 billion.
57.5 billion.
Which works out to a pretty robust compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, of about 6.2% over that whole period.
So hang on, doing the math here. That means the market value is basically set to more than double between 2021 and 2033.
That's right. More than double. It's not just, slow and steady growth. It really speaks volumes about how much people are adopting e-bikes for commuting, for fun, for all sorts of things.
Okay, so if the market's doubling, we need to break that down. Where is this huge growth actually happening? Because I guess it's not spread evenly across the globe. There must be leaders, maybe some surprises. Where do we start this world tour?
Well, the data points pretty clearly towards Asia Pacific. It's definitely one of the most dynamic and also one of the largest markets. It generated close to $9.5 billion back in 2021.
9.5 billion, okay.
And that's projected to shoot up past $20.9 billion by 2033.
Wow, so more than doubling there, too.
Exactly, with a strong CAGR for the region overall, about 6.8%. It's really a powerhouse driving the global trend.
And you think Asia Pacific, you immediately think China, right? Just because
Yeah.
of the scale. Is it still the big leader there?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
China's still a massive player. Can't ignore it. Its market was just over $2.9 billion in 2021.
Yeah.
And it's projected to grow to nearly $6.2 billion by 2033. That's a solid CAGR, almost 6.5%. Just the sheer volume production consumption. It gives China huge influence.
Right. But here's where I think you'll find this really interesting. While China's huge in size, the report actually flags India as having the fastest growth in that region. We're talking a massive TGR of almost 8.6%.
8.6, that's impressive.
Yeah, taking its market from about 1.5 billion in 2021 up to an estimated 4.05 billion by 2033. So what do you think is behind that, India's acceleration versus China's, sheer volume?
That is a great question. India's surge.
Yeah.
Well, it's likely a mix of things, isn't it? You probably got rapid urbanization, more need for efficient city transport, maybe rising fuel prices, making e-bikes look more appealing.
Sure.
And possibly government nudges, incentives, maybe pushing towards electric vehicles generally.
Right.
So yeah, India becomes a really critical market to watch, alongside some other fast movers there too, like Singapore's got a 7.3% CAGR,
Yeah.
and Australia's over 7.2%. So lots of action in that region.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, so Asia Pacific is clearly dynamic. But is this growth story just happening in the East? Or are other places seeing similar shifts? What about Europe?
Europe's definitely in the race, a very steady, significant climb there. The European market was worth nearly $6.8 billion back in 2021.
Okay.
That's expected to rise past $8.4 billion by 2025. And the forecast for 2033, over $13 billion.
13 billion.
Yeah, growing at a KGR of around 5.6%. And Germany, well, no huge surprise there, it continues to be the biggest market within Europe. It's heading towards about $2.4 billion by 2033 on its own.
Okay, so Germany's the biggest, but like we saw with India and Asia, are there any, pockets of faster growth within Europe?
Yes, there are actually. Germany provides that big stable base,
Mm.
but Italy, for instance, is showing a higher growth rate, just over 6.1% CAGR. And
Interesting.
Russia's even faster, predicted at 6.6%. It's also kind of notable that the UK's growth seems a bit slower, around 4.8% CAGR,
Slower than others.
especially compared to, say, Spain, which
Yeah.
is posting a really strong 6.5% CAGR. So it just shows you get different adoption rates even within, a relatively mature market like Europe.
That's a great point, those internal variations. Okay, let's cross the Atlantic. North America. How's the e-bike story playing out there?
North America looks very solid,
Yeah.
a strong growth path. The market there pulled in nearly 7.8 billion in 2021,
Right.
projected to hit over 9.7 billion by 2025. And the forecast for 2033 is around $15.2 billion.
Mm.
That's a THER of roughly 5.7%. And the United States
Yeah.
unquestionably holds the dominant share of that market.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. The US market is huge, right? Over 6 billion in 2021 alone, projected to reach what? Over 11.4 billion by 2033 at about a 5.5% CAGR. But are we seeing that same pattern again? Any country in North America growing faster than the US, even if it's smaller overall?
Yes, quite clearly, actually. Well, the U.S. is the volume leader, no doubt. Canada is actually outpacing it quite significantly on growth rate.
Really?
Yeah, showing a robust TIGR of over 7.2%.
Okay.
So that suggests maybe different adoption drivers, perhaps different market dynamics up north. It's an interesting contrast.
It really is. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's look at what we might call the emerging frontiers. Because the report suggests there's a lot of potential and some pretty exciting growth figures coming from other regions, too. What can you tell us about, say, South America, the Middle East, and Africa?
Yeah, those regions are definitely showing strong promise, you're right. Take South America, it was near $2 billion in 2021, and it's expected to more than double, hitting over $4.2 billion by 2073. That's a strong CAGR, about 6.7%.
Okay.
Brazil's the biggest market there, but you see really strong growth coming out of Argentina, over 7.1% CAGR predicted. And Colombia's right there too, almost 7.17%.
Ah. And the Middle East, that feels, I don't know, maybe surprising given its association with oil and gas.
It does feel a bit counterintuitive maybe, but the numbers are there. The Middle East started just over $1 billion in 2021, growing to over $2.2 billion by 2033. That's a healthy CAGR, nearly 7%.
Nearly 7%.
Yeah. And what's particularly fascinating, I think, is the United Arab Emirates, the UAE. It's showing an incredibly impressive CAGR, over 8.2%,
Over 8%. Okay, that's huge.
making it a real key growth driver in that region. But Saudi Arabia and Turkey are also significant contributors, so it suggests a broader regional shift towards electric mobility is happening.
And finally, Africa. We shouldn't overlook that continent. What's the picture there?
Right. Africa's Lion e-bike market, it grew from just over 834 million in 2021, projected to hit 1.84 billion by 2033. The CAGR there is about 6.6%.
Okay.
Nigeria leads in terms of current market size, but South Africa is showing particularly fast growth with a CAGR over 7.1%. So, yeah, these emerging markets may be smaller in absolute dollars right now,
Yeah.
but they're clearly set for some pretty significant expansion in the coming years.
Okay, so we've done the world tour, looked at billions in percentages. When we try and connect all these dots, what's the kind of the big picture takeaway for you, the listener, from this deep dive?
Well, I think the picture is remarkably clear, actually. We are seeing consistent, substantial, and truly global growth in Lion e-bikes, period.
Right.
It also highlights that the pace varies,
Mm-hmm.
but the direction is universally up, with Asia-Pacific and, interestingly, the Middle East showing some of the most dynamic acceleration.
Yeah.
And we're seeing specific countries acting not just as, regional volume leaders,
Okay.
but as real growth engines,
Yeah.
pushing the whole global market forward at different rates.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about what these numbers are suggesting about our habits, how we get around, how transportation is changing.
Absolutely.
From busy city centers to, well, maybe even quieter areas too, personal mobility is clearly evolving everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
The data seems to point towards a future where these e-bikes are much more central, which has knock-on effects for infrastructure, urban planning, everything.
Definitely.
It's more than just sales figures, isn't it? It feels like a proper societal shift. So as you think about this really significant growth projected for e-bikes globally. And those interesting regional differences we've talked about, maybe consider this. What are the wider implications? The broader societal things, maybe environmental considerations that come along with such a big shift. How might this actually impact our existing transport infrastructure? What about energy demand? And even things like public health in our towns and cities over the next, say, 10 years or so. Something to ponder. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into the really electrifying world of the Li-ion e-bike market. Lithium ion, that is. It's such a fascinating place where, clean mobility meets everyday convenience. Our mission, well, it's what we always do. Dig into our source material this time, insights from cognitive market research, and pull out the most important stuff for you. We want to understand what's really driving this e-bike trend, what hurdles are popping up, and where it might be going next.
Yeah, and it's definitely the right time to talk about this. E-bikes, they're not just some niche thing anymore. They're becoming, well, a really significant part of how people get around. And the impact is pretty broad, actually. It goes from like one person's daily commute all the way up to global environmental goals.
Mm-hmm.
They really offer quite a transformative solution, particularly in cities.
Transformative. I like that word for it. Okay, so let's unpack this. What is driving this huge uptake? Our sources, cognitive market research, they point to urbanization and this big push for sustainable ways to travel. We all see the city problems, right? Congestion, air quality. But the research really highlights how e-bikes nail that first and last mile issue in dense areas, the part that even good public transport sometimes struggles with, which, interestingly, means high adoption even where transit use is already common.
Exactly. But what's fascinating here is how the tech, especially battery tech, has really enabled all this. We're talking e-bikes now that can go, 50 to 100 kilometers on just one charge. And it's not just the distance. Charging is faster. The battery packs are lighter, and crucially, they're often modular. That modularity is key. You can swap them or take them inside to charge. That's a huge plus if you live in an apartment, right? No garage needed. It genuinely makes them a strong competitor to regular bikes and even small motorbikes or scooters.
Yeah, that range and being able to just pop the battery out, that sounds like a real game changer for city living. But okay, besides the tech itself, what else is pulling people towards e-bikes?
Oh, government support is another massive, massive factor. You look at places like Germany, France, India too.
Hmm.
They're offering subsidies, financial incentives. That directly lowers the upfront cost for people buying them. And it's not just about affordability for the buyer. It expands the whole market.
Yeah.
It also pushes manufacturers to develop more models, maybe even more affordable ones. So you combine that cutting-edge tech with helpful policies, and suddenly the demand for e-bikes becomes almost irresistible.
Right, it creates this perfect storm almost. But, despite all that positive momentum, it can't all be smooth riding. The research definitely points out some pretty big hurdles. For instance, the cost. That initial price tag compared to a regular bike, that's still a major barrier, wouldn't you say? Especially maybe in developing regions or lower income areas where those subsidies might not be available.
Absolutely. Affordability is a huge one. And then there are those other concerns consumers sometimes have around the lithium-ion batteries themselves. Safety, life cycle.
Yeah, you hear about the risks like overheating or fires, sometimes in the news.
You do. But what the sources suggest is that the actual number of incidents
Mm-hmm.
is, well, remarkably low compared to how many e-bikes are out there. Often when something does happen, it's linked to specific manufacturing issues, not the technology itself being inherently flawed. It's a nuance that sometimes gets lost, I think.
That's a really important distinction.
It is. And this whole cost and safety perception thing, it really brings up a bigger question
Hmm.
about, equitable access. Can everyone actually benefit? And beyond those consumer level things, there are wider issues. Infrastructure gaps,
Hmm.
regulatory gaps in parts of Latin America, Africa, Asia.
Yeah.
The lack of things like protected bike lanes, clear road safety rules, that really holds back e-bike adoption.
Yeah.
If you don't have safe places to ride or policies that support e-bikes, it's just really hard for the market to take off properly. Makes it tough for e-bikes to be seen as a truly safe, practical option for everybody.
Sounds like that classic chicken and egg problem, doesn't it? You need the bikes for the infrastructure, but you need the infrastructure for the bike.
Exactly. It's a common challenge for new mobility tech.
Okay, so that paints a picture of the challenges. But looking ahead, what's happening on the innovation front? How is the market responding? What does this all mean for the future of these e-bikes?
Well, things are definitely moving fast. We're seeing some really exciting trends. One big one is the rise of smart, connected e-bikes. People now kind of expect features like built-in GPS, tracking through an app, maybe anti-theft alerts.
Oh, okay.
These aren't just add-ons anymore. They're turning e-bikes into, as the report puts it, full-fledged data-driven mobility tools.
Huh.
Ah.
So it's not just a bike with a motor anymore. It's practically a smart device on wheels. And I feel like I'm seeing different types of e-bikes more too, not just for commuting. Saw one the other day just packed with delivery boxes weaving through traffic.
Exactly. That's another huge trend.
Hmm.
The boom in cargo e-bikes and also those moped-style ones, they're specifically designed for things like urban delivery or for families carrying groceries or even kids. Small businesses doing local logistics are using them too, especially in the gig economy where that kind of flexible transport is key.
Right, it's opening up whole new uses.
It really is. It's carving out a whole new segment in urban logistics.
So if we connect all this, is there any one model emerging that could really shake things up? Something truly transformative for, say, accessibility or those logistics uses?
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the most interesting models gaining traction is battery as a service. BASR, for short.
Battery as a service, how does that work?
So instead of buying the battery with the bike, which is often the most expensive part, you essentially subscribe to the battery, or you just swap it out. You ride up to a station, swap your depleted battery for a fully charged one, and off you go.
Okay, wow.
It's a
Yeah.
potential game changer. Why? Well, first, it drastically cuts the initial purchase price of the e-bike, makes it way more affordable up front. And second, it solves the charging headache, especially for shared bike fleets. No need for complex charging infrastructure at depots, just swap and go.
I can see how that would work.
It's already huge in parts of Asia, and it's really starting to gain ground in Europe, too. It could fundamentally change how we think about using e-bikes for city travel and deliveries.
That really does sound like a major shift, moving from owning the power source to just accessing it. Well, that brings us towards the end of our deep dive today into the lithium-ion e-bike market. We've covered quite a bit, those powerful growth drivers like cities needing smarter solutions and the leaps in tech. We also navigated some key challenges: cost, infrastructure, safety perceptions, and we looked ahead at cool innovations like smart connectivity, cargo bikes, and this battery as a service idea. All these insights, remember, come from our look at the cognitive market research material. Hopefully it gives you a shortcut to understanding this really fast-moving sector. It's definitely shaping how cities and people get around globally.
Absolutely. And maybe just a final thought to leave you with something to mull over. Think beyond just the e-bike as transport. Consider the ripple effects of millions more people using them. What does widespread e-bike adoption actually mean for, say, urban planning? How we design our streets, our neighborhoods? What about the impact on our energy grids as charging needs grow? Or, maybe even more fundamentally, how could it start to redefine what personal mobility even means to us? It feels like it could be about much more than just getting from A to B. Definitely something more to think about than just the ride itself.